This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. Respectonomics brings you in the Living Asset series, and we call these the life series, the life component of our discussions. And this is called Symptom Swap. Brought to you by Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I am the voice of Respectonomics. And symptom swap means that we swap one symptom for another. Now, we've often thought of a barter system, haven't we, where we exchange something for something. But what we're talking about here is a barter system that works in our own lives, and it's often to do with symptoms. I'll give you an example, and that is, all of us to one degree or another experience addictions or obsessions or fantasies. And sometimes they are DNA items, meaning they are structurally built into the very physiology of ourselves. When that happens and they are disturbing the peace, when they are bringing conflict into our lives or to other people's lives, when those things happen, it is a statement of truth that we need to get expert, intense therapy from the professionals. What we're talking about here, though, is in our normal day-to-day living. Hard to define normal, isn't it? But anyway, what we want to do here is separate out this, what I call the DNA item, and look at us from an emotional point of view, and think of our emotions as being ones that finesse or influence our behavior. Now, the key is this. If I have an addiction, let's say to alcohol, and if I have that addiction, then if I resolve that addiction, there's a serious risk that the addictive personality will in fact be reflected in another area of my life. If I have an obsession, and I manage to, in fact, how often do we hear somebody's obsessed with something and you say, yes, well, that's today, tomorrow they'll be obsessed with something else. And then there's fantasies, of course, which may be fun, but in fact are often avoidance techniques. So when we add up the addictions, obsessions, and fantasies, we can sort of say to ourselves, yes, those are they. We think about how we want to influence them or bring them under control. But what we often find is that there is a substitution of symptoms. And what we really want to do is, if we are dealing with the symptoms may be ones where we are hurting, where we're feeling fear of rejection, fear of looking foolish. There can be myriad reasons for this. But whatever they may be, we may be looking at symptoms and not actually at the problem. And if we want to identify the problem, if we want to confront it and indeed eliminate it, we need the tools to do that, don't we? So the tools that we recommend is this. One of the most powerful vehicles available to the human being is the art and the practice of writing a journal. Now, most people, when they hear of writing a journal, they shiver. They say, I can't do that. No, I haven't got time, and they come up with lots of reasons, and it's too depressing. And the answer is, if you look at some of the greatest people in history, what do you notice about them? They write these autobiographies. These autobiographies are generally really glorified journals. This is what I did, or what we did. So in a journal, let me put down some guardrails here. And the first thing is, you do a journal, we do a journal, I do a journal, maybe 3 or 4 days a week, not 7 days a week. Typically, when we say I'm going to do something 7 days a week, it explodes underneath us. No, we give ourselves room to say, no, I can't do it today or tomorrow, or whatever it is. But the answer is, writing a journal 4 or 5 days a week is just manageable. Secondly, it should be done at the same time, meaning you do it at 5 o'clock in the evening. It's always best to do it at the end of the day, by the way, because all the events of the day are most current in your mind. And then the other thing is to make a deal or a sort of transactional commitment that you're going to spend half an hour doing it or 20 minutes, whatever your timeline is. So 5 o'clock, I'm going to spend 20 minutes doing a journal. And what does this journal look like? The first thing is, can't overemphasize this, it is extraordinarily private. So private, no one else even knows you're doing it. They don't know where you keep it, and you hide it, and so on. This isn't a question of secrecy. The reason for this is because if you write a journal that somebody else is going to be taking a peek at, you tend to write the journal for that individual. This is being written for you, by you, at you. The next thing is that in writing the journal, writing in and of itself is a very powerful technique. You know, we've all got our fingers on the keyboards and fingers on the screens and all that kind of stuff. Anatomically, historically, go to the origins of the human being. When we write, we put our brain into a place where certain activities take place, and those activities will not be mimicked or replicated when we are on the screen. Writing is, in and of itself, a creative weapon. It works. Have you ever found that time when you've written a letter and how great you feel after writing a letter or even a postcard? You're at some fancy resort in the Caribbean and you write back and saying, wish you were here, ha ha ha, having a great time. And when you send that, or when you write it rather, you really do feel rather good about it. Writing is powerful. So writing a journal is key, not typing. Next thing is you do three things on a journal. Literally write down, what did you do today? What did I do today? And it can be anything. It might be you went for a walk. It might be you had a cup of coffee. You went to the office. You met with some clients. Whatever it might be, you just write down what you did. But the second paragraph, if you call it a paragraph, is to write down what you felt about what you did. Now, this is the absolute key to this whole issue of understanding the symptoms and the problems. We tend to say, I did such and such and had a really great time. So let's try that. So it's a Friday afternoon, and one of your co-workers says, boy, it's been a fabulous week. Let's go out and party. So you go out and party, and boy, do you have a great time. As a matter of fact, you don't get home till 8 o'clock that night. And that's the sort of, had a great time. Now let's write down what happened. We write down, that's what I did. Now let's write down, what did I feel about what I did? And what you'll experience typically is when you write out what you felt about what you did, you come up with, well, I don't really feel very good about what I did. I was away from office, family, and friends for 5 or 6 hours, spent a lot of money, which I really shouldn't have. It really probably has left me with a kind of a sulky feeling. What's extraordinary is that something that was meant to feel good actually doesn't make us feel good. In contrast, that same Friday afternoon, an individual says to you, come on, let's go out. It's been a great week. And you say, no, I've got some reports I want to finish up. I've got a couple of phone calls I want to complete and so on. I'm on a roll. I'm going to get it done. And that's what you do. Let's write that one down. This is what I did. How did you feel about that? These are things you don't enjoy doing. But how do you feel about it? I feel really good. I feel satisfied. I felt productive. I've created an opportunity or a template for next week. Yep, I'm really glad I did it. So there you have an example of what you thought wasn't going to give you pleasure makes you feel good. And a journal is an excellent way of identifying the correlation between activity and your sense of satisfaction with that activity. And then the third thing is, you can ask yourself, you've written the journal to say what I did, what did I feel about what I did? And the third component is to write down what triggered the activity. Because we humanly, if we know what triggered the activity, if the activity was bad, then you want to avoid that trigger. If the activity was good and made us feel terrific, then in fact we want to increase the availability of that trigger. We want it. So finding out what triggered the activity can be a very good way to guide us into doing the things that give us pleasure or to avoid the things that do not. What triggered the activity? In that case, someone came into my office and said, let's go out. That's what triggered the activity because it reminded me that I wanted to get on with my work at hand. That may not be the easiest trigger to arrange, but having maybe an open door so that people come in and can communicate. And there can be different ways of looking at the trigger points. They're very personal. This whole issue of writing a journal is very powerful. It's greatly helpful in understanding where we are using, let's just say, obsessions to cover up other kinds of behaviors. And when we bring our behavior to ourselves and get it into writing and talk about how we're dealing with it, we understand far better in our own selves how we confront these issues and perhaps even eliminate them. There it is. If you'd like more to talk about this, jeremy@respectonomics.com. Our team is available for workshops, presentations, and addresses. And on that basis, I rest my case. Thank you.